Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, September. All right, forget it. Goodbye, everybody. The show's over. September 23rd, 2024. Okay, we'll have a double 24 tomorrow. That's good news. Time for another show. Time for another week. It's a little, gray and damp out here today. I guess it's turning fall. And saw somebody already getting ready to complain about the darkness returning and daylight savings time ending. And although it's bizarre that we wait so long to end daylight savings time as it is, I think we still have a month of daylight savings time left, which is probably a little bit too much. But I did see someone tweeting out a meme, hello darkness, my old friend. Soon you'll start at 5 p.m. Sad. But true and happening. And I guess already happening is just grayer than usual in the morning. Turning a little chilly. The bears are probably out, not here so much as they are in Connecticut. We'll check in on the bear situation there, as well as Greg Dworkin returns to the air today. Big day for the show yesterday. Rosalind McGregor was in town. And by in town, I mean another town. And then she was on her way to a different town, but a town nearby me. And so I went there to that town to meet her on her way to the other town. And that's it. I mean, we had some dinner. It was nice. Met in Frederick, Maryland on her way to D.C. for a big event. I'm sure she'll tell you all about that. No report from her today or this week as she is at this big event, which is really interesting from a political and historical perspective. The Sentinels standing outside of the White House and asking, cajoling, pleading, shaming, trying to move the White House and all actors involved towards ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, the ratification having actually been accomplished by the requisite number of states, but some legal wrangling. Many of you are probably interested in the Equal Rights Amendment, and so doing some wrangling over whether or not the thing has been legally, constitutionally ratified or not, and there's some paperwork that goes along with it, and as you know, Donald Trump, not to be trusted with paperwork, blocked the whole thing. And well, I don't know. We'll save it as a topic, perhaps. Maybe that's something she wants to speak to once her turn at the helm. No, I don't know if it's the helm, but let's say out with the protesters and suffragette sentinels in front of the White House. So, okay, big accomplishment for the show in terms of getting a chance to meet in person. So that was very nice. Thank you very much for coming back. And she had some lovely Michigan gifts for me as well. Some locally made products, including, let's see, I should probably, during one of the breaks, I'll go back and grab the things so that I can, plug the brands, and all you Michiganders and Michigander exiles can daydream and wish you were me, that you had this bag of Detroit-made potato chips. You probably already know exactly which brand it is. It's not visible from my seat, which is too bad. And some nice chocolates. I do remember Faygo sodas were in there. That's a brand I've seen before, so there are a couple of those. And all around pleasant evening and a great chance to catch up and learn some of the mystery behind our senior Michigan correspondent's story. All right. What else to discuss? I don't know. That's really about it as far as I'm concerned over the weekend. I was saying in the Morning Post here, the luxury of Trump-free weekends is kind of behind us now. That's not a thing we can do anymore as we're in the heat of an election season. Polling happening, so things to catch up with. The polling world, I guess, aflame because the New York Times published a New York Times Siena poll, and as you know, it showed Trump winning by 100 million electoral votes, and so we all have to worry / parse / ask what the hell the New York Times is doing, whatever it is. And, Greg Dworkin's here to do it, so I guess we probably should just jump right into it, unless there's a bear. Good morning, Greg.
If there's a bear, I'll be the one that's doing the jumping.
Yes, a bear, vamos. Okay.
Yeah. well, what's really interesting to me this morning about the New York Times poll,
Yes.
it's not setting the agenda.
All right.
The NBC poll from yesterday is.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good because I woke up. I said, "Oh no, New York Times, CNN. Everybody's gonna be talking about this. It's not gonna be great."
Yeah, whatever. Just throw
Good,
it on
cool.
the pile. Their polls are swinging so wildly.
Swinging, man.
I mean, they're basically moving toward Trump like 6 points since the last. It's crazy. So you say, okay, fine. Everybody has outliers.
It's a weird
Even good
thing.
polls have outliers. Just throw it on the pile and ignore it. And the first person that said that was Nate Cohen, who writes up the New York Times polls. He
knows
wrote an
what to do
article
with it.
this morning that said, yeah, you're looking at these polls and trying to make sense of it. Don't. Just put it on the pile.
Okay. I mean, you wonder why,
I think
but
it's it because, oh my God, the New York Times. Well, no. See, what really happened, and we'll get to that, is that the NBC used to be the NBC Wall Street Journal poll. Now it's just the NBC poll. Came out with something that was just so favorable to Harris in every possible way. It set the agenda for the week.
oh, okay.
It's probably her best poll since the Iowa poll that showed her only down by 4 when Trump was up 18 over Biden. And it is extraordinarily influential. It's a very good poll. And we'll get to that. But I want to cover a couple other things first, only because if I don't, I'll forget.
All right.
Like Congress, for example, like the House.
I have already forgotten.
Like rules committee, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I had forgotten about those guys.
Yeah, well, you know something about Congress. So, I turned to my congressional expert to explain this to me. It's not hard. I just don't understand what's going to happen. The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, or the purported Speaker of the House, I don't know what to call him.
He's going to
not
fall
very
in an
good at his job.
alligator pit, I think, if that's the prediction you were looking for. Yeah.
Well, he wants to keep the government open.
Ha!
So what he did
believe
last
him.
week is bring up a bill for a continuing resolution, which we in the political world call the CR.
Right.
Which means that, okay, we don't really have the votes, the wherewithal, the competence, the confidence, whatever you want to call it. Certainly don't have the votes to put together budgets.
Right. Sort of.
So therefore, we'll just keep things the way they are for now while we figure it out.
Yes. Appropriations bills.
So
the
the continuing
sticklers.
resolution that Johnson brought to the floor for reasons unknown had an
Nothing else to
attachment
do.
called the Save Amendment.
Yes.
And the Save Amendment was this thing that said that you need proof of citizenship in order to vote.
Yes.
Sounds harmless, but really isn't. Let me just give you one example.
All right.
Right?
Right.
Let's say a woman marries a man
What? Where?
and changes her name
Okay.
to fit his. Has this ever happened in the United States?
You mean like an alias, a criminal person hiding from the authorities?
No, just like an ordinary, average,
Regular?
everyday 23-year-old who, meets somebody in college, gets engaged, and then they get married.
Hates their last name. Sure.
Well,
I
whether
know
they
it.
hate it or not, they do the traditional route,
Right.
and they change their name. Then they
They're
go to
trad
vote.
wives.
But
Yeah.
you have to prove their citizenship. What do you have, the birth certificate?
That's
different
not
name.
yours. Yeah. Prove it.
So
Yeah.
what do you have to bring your marriage license to prove
Yeah.
that you're a citizen based on your birth certificate and your marriage license and your photo ID, real ID, license? I mean, that the
I don't know. I
point
haven't
is,
done it. But
this
maybe.
is just like an ordinary, everyday situation that you just made incredibly difficult. But you would do that if you only want white men to vote.
Yes, that's true. It would get in the way of white women voting.
So what's the point of the SAVE Act? There isn't one, but they insisted on attaching it anyway. It didn't have the votes, and so Mike Johnson pulled the bill.
Okay.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I don't know why they did this, but they did this. So Donald
said
Trump
to do
says
it.
to the Republicans, do not keep the government open, do not pass a continuing resolution unless it has the SAVE Act.
Yeah.
And Johnson said, fine, I'm going to do it without the SAVE Act.
But he's not the president. Why are you listening to him? He
He's
also
not.
won't be.
So Mike Johnson's going to put a clean continuing resolution on the floor,
Amazing.
probably for a vote on Wednesday.
It's a good clean day.
However,
Mhm.
in order to pass it, he can't do it with Republicans Because the ones who wanted the SAVE Act won't vote for it without the SAVE Act, and the ones who didn't want the SAVE Act won't vote for it with the SAVE Act. So the only way to do it is with Democrats.
Yeah.
Right? Follow so far?
Yes, I think I know this story so far. Kevin McCarthy did it.
The back of your hand. So,
yeah,
Mike Johnson wants to put this bill on the floor. How does he do that?
Bend over
He's
and
got to
drop
go
it.
through Rules Committee.
The bill, I mean. Yeah.
The bill, because if he doesn't go through Rules Committee, he'll have to suspend the rules. If you suspend the rules, it's not a bare majority.
Right.
But if you go through Rules Committee, it is. So since Johnson has trouble with his people and he wants this thing to pass because he figures if the government shuts down, it's a disaster for the Republicans prior to the election. So he wants the government to stay open. It needs to be a clean bill. It's going to have Democratic votes. He wants to make it as easy as possible. Therefore, Rules Committee this morning, tomorrow a vote on the rule, and then Wednesday a vote on the CR.
Yeah, okay.
That's, as I see it laid out. Correct me if I'm wrong. My question is, how does he know he gets through Rules Committee? It used to be that was a given, but as you and I know, not anymore.
I don't know, and it may be that, and I think this is, I was going to say, he may have a plan B for it, but I think this was the plan B, or he was referring to this as plan B. Plan C might be to go the suspension of the rules route and see if he can do it that way without the Rules Committee. But, I mean, if he can't...
But don't you need 2/3 for that?
You do, and if you got... but that's...
and if you have a 50-50, how do you get that?
Well, you have... How do you ever get it? You get it the way you get it every other time, with all the Democrats plus something less than half of the Republicans. I mean, there'll still be people who say, I just don't want the government to close. And the Republican conference is split up, so I understand it, into like 5 factions.
Yeah, exactly. How do you get that?
If you can get 3 of the factions to hate the other 2 enough, you might get the 85, 90 votes that you need to make 2/3 and pass a bill like that.
Oh, yeah, you have to get Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jim Jordan to oppose it so that the rest of the Republicans say, okay, I'm for it.
Yeah, and the factions are so weird now, they may be in the faction that votes for it somehow. I don't know why they would on substance, but if they're convinced that their rival loves it or hates it, they'll vote for it. I wouldn't want to depend on it for the route.
So here's my second question.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so they're not going to suspend the rules unless they absolutely have to. They're going to try to go through Rules Committee.
That's the way to get to require the least number of votes on the floor.
Which is to say a bare majority.
Yes.
My question for you is, can the Rules Committee add amendments?
Yes.
So Johnson wants a clean bill. How do we know it's going to come out of Rules Committee as a clean bill?
You don't. Ordinarily, the Rules Committee used to be the Speaker's committee.
Right, and so whatever he said
went, and
that was the end of it. All this stuff comes up now that, how do you know?
You don't. I mean, he talks to people, I guess, and asks you, you're not gonna add any amendments, are you?
And he can't count votes because every time he does that, he has to pull a bill. So, that's not convincing. How does he know?
Yeah, although maybe, So some people would say, oh no, he can count votes. That's why he pulled the bill. McCarthy couldn't count votes and didn't try. He just held the votes and, I lost. Pulling the bill is not, I lost, now I'll pull the bill. That's getting kicked off. But so he'll
Mitch McConnell's favorite saying, there's no education with the second kick of a mule.
No. I don't. Okay, I guess that's supposed to make sense in Kentucky, but I get it.
It does, once you get kicked once, why would you go back and get kicked again?
I really don't know, but he keeps getting kicked, so I can't. All right. Well, I don't know, but he can go to the Rules Committee members and talk to them and ask them, and why don't you see that this is the only way forward, and roll the dice, and you never know. With the way this conference is divided, it may be that the Chip Roys of the world now say, I really don't want the government to close. I want the SAVE Act in there, but we've seen the results. We can't have the votes. So it's a question, open or closed, which one would you rather campaign with? And I'd rather campaign with it open.
Chip Roy can say that because the SAVE Act went to the floor and failed.
Yes.
And therefore, Mike Johnson does sometimes put bills on the floor that fail because he can't count votes.
Yes.
rather than just pull it.
That is true, too. And although the SAVE Act itself there was a Clean Save Act at one point. They passed that, and they did fine. The Republicans all voted for it, and the Democrats all voted against it, but it passed, but it went to the Senate.
Because it went to the House and, died in committee or whatever the saying is these days with the kids.
Right. And so, I mean, they've had all their symbolic votes. So, sometimes it depends. Sometimes people wake up and smell the coffee in ways that they don't or refuse to ordinarily when an election is near.
Right. Now, the thing that they're actually putting on the floor is a 3-month funding bill. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that means it expires. Today's Monday, September 23rd.
Yeah, so October, November, December. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Is that an important time?
It's supposed to expire like 2 days before Christmas.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
Right. So how does that work? I mean, there's just so much about this that's just awful.
Funny,
I just
don't
thought
look
I
like
would mention
Christmas.
it.
Yeah. That's not great timing, but it is.
Well, we want to go home. You can't go home.
Yeah. Although that's very good congressional timing in the sense that now we'll have you over a barrel, and if you don't vote for what I give you next time, you're going to miss your flight home for Christmas. Kind of, and then it becomes a sitcom or a rom-com and trying to get home, and you know how it goes. They make movies out of this. The Hallmark Channel will be full up,
right,
with Congress people trying to get home.
Okay, so let's move on and just talk a little bit about North Carolina.
All right.
One of the many funny things that happened over the weekend is that Mark Robinson's campaign itself imploded. He already had. We talked about that last week.
Danger.
But his campaign manager quit. His staff quit. A whole bunch of people quit. I don't think there's anybody left working for him except that guy that stuck with Adolf Hitler in Downfall.
Yeah. Well, they weren't allowed to leave.
Right. But okay. So why did they leave? Not because all of a sudden they found ethics or they decided that, I can't work for this guy. They already had worked for this guy.
Yeah.
Clearly they think he's on his way to losing and they just want to get out before the stench sticks to them too badly.
Right.
Because they want to stay in politics. Germany. That's why they're leaving. Okay, well, that's all, we know he's going to lose. There's lots of speculation about whether or not there's going to be reverse coattails in the sense that everything bad about Mark Robinson is going to reflect on Donald Trump, who still won't give him up. He won't let him come to the campaign rallies, but Trump won't endorse him.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the fact checkers, by the way, to say he never said the word endorse.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So while this is happening, and there's a vacuum because we don't know, he's not talking to the press. His campaign isn't answering any calls, so you can't really find out what's going on.
There's no one there to pick them up. Right. Okay. Hello?
And in this vacuum, steps a fellow who says, I'm the new campaign chairman.
Is it Alexander Haig? He's dead.
Close.
Yeah, I heard.
Okay.
Okay.
And the guy who says it is a fella named Jack Burkman.
What?
Now, that may tickle a memory.
Yeah.
But what he wrote is, I'm officially announcing tonight I've assumed the position of acting campaign manager for Mark Robinson. Mark is a great American and a perfect governor for North Carolina. We look forward to a big victory in November. Burkman, the founder of lobbying firm Burkman and Associates, and his associate Jacob Wohl, who may be more familiar to you.
Yeah.
When you look at Twitter, you see Jacob Wohl's name. Most people use a potato to describe him. That symbol has become associated with him.
I did not know that.
Pleaded guilty on October 2022 to telecommunications fraud after using robocalls to intimidate people from voting by mail during the 2020 U.S. presidential election. You may recall Burkman, who's a little older, and Wohl, who's the young kid, often will call these press conferences and say, I have information you need to know, and then they lie and make up something completely bogus, and then they do it again 3 months from that.
All in their driveway. In their driveway of Burkman's townhouse. That's
the U.S. Federal Communications, because they couldn't afford total landscaping.
Exactly.
Four Seasons. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission in June hit Burkman and Wohl with a $5.1 million fine for making more than 1,100 unlawful robocalls in August and September 2020. So this is the guy who claims he's now the new campaign manager. Like, nobody believes him. That's
the funny thing.
He's,
I don't know whether to believe
Baron
that.
von Munchausen Jr. compared to Trump Baron von Munchausen, so nobody believes the thing he says. It's just odd. It is hysterical that he would go out and make that announcement.
That's the sort of thing that you can is transparently. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess that could be true.
He didn't because there's no campaign,
no one to answer, and this is the sort of thing that he recognizes. There's no one authoritative to fact check me on it, and it's so crazy. Everyone would probably just maybe believe that I would take this job, and Mark Robinson is probably so out of it that he might allow it. Right. So there's every chance that I don't know that there's been any association with the campaign at all prior to this. I mean, given Mark Robinson's record for outrageous scandal that was driving him basically out of the race without dropping out, I would say yes, there is an association.
I met Mark Robinson years ago at a small business.
Right.
Where
very
we
small.
went in together and the lights were low and
there was only one chair in there in this one business. And everybody had to patronize it one at a time. It was very weird. Anyway, so, there's more than one Nude Africa fan out there. You never know what Jack Burkman's been up to.
Somebody, I don't have, I had put it in the Pundit Roundup this morning, but I couldn't stop laughing, so I pulled it out. Somebody had done a poll this morning.
Yeah.
Or yesterday that said, Mark Robinson, 51, and his opponent, Jeff Stein, 39. And then you look at the pollster, it's done in the same format as all the others that you see on Twitter.
Yeah.
And the pollster was Nude Africa. And I started laughing and I reposted it and said, do not look at the crosstabs unless you were over 18.
I don't think you'll ever fail to get at least a chuckle out of me. It doesn't matter what the rest of the joke is. If the punchline is Nude Africa, it's going to work for about.
But it was brilliant. I'll send
months.
it to you. It was really, really very funny.
All right.
In any case,
yes.
Let's talk about some real polls. This is Mark Murray talking about the money poll.
He'd be into
talking about the NBC poll from yesterday. And he writes, what especially stands out in the poll is Harris's 16-point rise in favorability since July when she was Biden's running mate. It's the biggest jump in popularity for any major party presidential candidate in the 35-year history of the NBC News poll.
But she's
so
losing.
I sent that picture to you where you could see the streams cross, as Nate Silver likes to describe it.
Yeah,
it's a line from Ghostbusters. Voters' feelings toward Kamala Harris swung dramatically after Biden dropped out of the race. She's now in positive territory. And interestingly, Trump and Vance are in negative territory. Of course, the most popular of the politicians, Harris, I think, is +3. And I think that Tim Walz is at +7.
Okay, yes.
Right. Taylor Swift is +6. So Tim Walz is more popular than Taylor Swift, whereas Trump and Vance are down in the 13-15 range, minus. And, the point I'm trying to make is the entire strategy, the entire theory of the case behind the Trump campaign when Harris took over from Biden. They thought they were cruising to win. Then they had to come up with a new idea. They realized Trump isn't popular. He's never going to win over new voters. She's the change candidate, which this poll certainly, emphasizes. We'll get to that in a minute. But the point is that the job of the Trump campaign was to swift vote Harris and make her unpopular.
Yes.
And the same with Walz especially.
They actually tried that.
People didn't know him, and they actually went to the stolen valor move from the old swift vote days. It has failed. Tim Walz is now more popular than Taylor Swift. Kamala Harris is in positive territory.
Shake it off, Taylor.
Their entire theory of the case has collapsed. It doesn't work.
They don't have good theories of anything.
Right. But I just want to point that out because when you step back and look at the big picture, Harris needs to introduce herself to people and then convince folks that she has a plan for the economy, which is everybody's biggest issue.
Yeah.
Trump is well known. There's nothing he could do to change his image or get rid of his felonies, no matter how many times he challenges it in court. And so his only route to win is to make Harris less popular than him, and he's failed. So who's going to win the election. Duh.
Okay.
So also in this poll, Trump leads on the border, economy, and inflation, but by much less than he used to, while Harris is ahead on abortion, temperament, and change. Like, ahead on change. She's the change candidate.
Right. That was always good.
How can she be the change candidate when she's the Biden administration? You know, part of the answer is that Trump was already president and she never has been.
That's true, too. And then they changed who was at the top of the ticket. And, yeah, it was
Trump
a name you knew.
Representing change, 38%. Harris representing change, 47%. Trump's never going to change.
No.
That's what people are saying here. Being honest and trustworthy, that's one of Trump's lowest, 34%. Harris gets 49%. Dealing with the issue of abortion, 33% for Trump, 54% for Harris. So this whole thing about everybody wanted Roe to be gotten rid of.
Oh, sure.
Oh, and I have a little rant about that, which I thought was just wonderful.
Oh.
So I put that aside.
All right.
And I want to talk a little bit about that too. All I have to do is find it now, which will take me just a moment. And that's why basically the New York Times stuff that came out this morning just isn't changing the conversation. So this is from a poster named YS over on Twitter and writes, which I think when I read it, I said, this really resonates. Please don't ask me how I know this is, the poster said. But Kamala hit on it at the debate, although it was about foreign policy when she said it. Yes. Trump's a danger because of how easily influenced he is by flattery, and then those flatterers who get close to him feed him BS info. Keep that thought because we're going to go into this after the break.
Okay. That's a dangerous combination, but one we're familiar with. Think about it for 2 minutes.
Yeah, think about how easily Trump is influenced, then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, that's why you don't put Laura Loomer on the plane. Okay, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We had a thought in mind that we were supposed to think about for 2 minutes. I forgot. What did you do during your 2-minute break? Do you remember what it was, Greg?
I do.
Good.
We're talking about the fact that Trump is really prone to flattery, and if you flatter him, he'll remember the last thing that somebody said to him.
Well, maybe that's a great mnemonic.
So this particular poster points out for the last 2 years, he's been stewing inside because he'll never admit it, but it happened. Somebody did get to him. They influenced this decision, and now it's coming back to bite him.
Oh.
And you know who that was? The evangelicals.
Oh.
Trump, since the Kansas abortion vote, has been using the line, everybody wanted it, added back to the states. But no, not everybody.
Added back to the states, too.
They
good phrasing.
Send it back. That's what they need to do. But for years, the Pence faction kept feeding him the idea that everybody wanted it. He bought it. He's an absolute illiterate imbecile, but he bought it hook, line, and sinker. And now he knows he was taken for a fool. He is the mark. He knows it now, but he can't admit it. And then he panics, right? And every time somebody brings up abortion, you see him turn red and deal with, well, everybody knew. Well, no, you're the only one that thought that, dummy.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly, every time he says that line, people say nobody was asking for this. Nobody wanted this.
Right. And so this poster says, look, he finally looked across the table and he saw he's the sucker and it's killing him.
Wow. I like that. That's a good point. That could really be the case.
It's embarrassing because he can't get away
right.
from it. He can't change the subject.
Yeah.
Right? Meanwhile, Melania Trump is selling Christmas ornaments on Twitter.
All right.
Somebody looked at that and said it cannot be real, and Reed Galen, the political strategist, ex-Republican, never-Trumper, said, oh, it's real, all right. This is a we're going to lose fire sale.
Are they...
Trump is selling something else. I forget what. I can't even remember anymore.
Yes. Well, in addition to NFTs and crypto, he's selling like silver medallions.
Something.
Coins.
With his picture on it, whatever it is. The point is they know they're losing. So getting back to this NBC poll here.
Okay.
Amy Walter looked at it and said,
50-50.
It's 50-50, but the NBC National Poll finds Harris undercutting Trump's Biden-era strengths on everything from competent and effective, Trump plus 18 in July, Harris plus 5 now, to ability to serve as commander-in-chief, Trump plus 6 in July, Harris plus 4 now.
Well, all right.
So you look at this poll, and it's just, incredibly favorable for her. And by the way, of course, she's up in the poll, 49-44.
Mm-hmm. How's she doing on new that they didn't want it sent back to the States?
Well, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
So she's basically winning. And, even if the New York Times, Siena universe of who they poll doesn't see it, because they had 3 swing states, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina, which moved in Trump's direction in this morning's poll, and they still had Trump plus 1 when they did the national. The rest of the polling universe simply is not seeing that. Another example, Sophia Begg wrote this about the Morning Consult poll. Now, they're supposed to have a poll out later today, but this was from a few days ago. Report out on the economy and the election, and the biggest takeaway, Harris has closed the trust gap with voters on the economy.
Okay.
Right? It's a broad topic, but voters trust Harris more than Biden on all of the issues we asked about. And it's much closer with Trump on most issues, but they trust Harris more on handling economic inequality, child care costs, and housing affordability.
Yes.
And they're not specifically asked this all the time, and in this case they were. And that's the kind of stuff people vote on.
That's what they say. Kitchen table, whatnot.
Kitchen table issues,
yeah.
Right? So I thought that I would point this out. Now, Steve Casala is a Massachusetts pollster, and his firm is called Mass Inc. It's not like Murder Inc. It's Mass Inc.
With a C, like incorporated?
MASSINC.
Okay.
Yeah. So they have Harris up in Wisconsin in a new poll this morning, 51-45 and 53-46 in a two-way.
Okay.
And he's going to have other, Pennsylvania up by 5. He's got 3 more swing states coming out this week.
That's good.
So what I'm trying to say is that the whole universe of polling, which you include NBC and you include, Mass Inc. and you include some of the others, are really all favorable for Harris. Harris had a great polling week last week. And the New York Times Siena is the only one that's a little different. It's important that good pollsters put their outliers out there. You're not supposed to herd. You're not supposed to have all the polls look the same. You're going to have outliers if it's done properly. There's going to be a distribution of results. So I'm fine with New York Times Siena. I don't think they're wrong in the sense that they're,
they didn't report false numbers
right at this moment. They're wrong in the sense I think that Harris is going to win, and they imply not. But even their own polling does not necessarily say Harris won't win. Remember, these are the folks that said, we see something really weird, that Harris, for example, is up 5 in Pennsylvania, but Trump is up +1 in the national. We think the national electoral college split doesn't exist anymore, not the way you think about it. And we're not the only people who are seeing this. So she's doing better in the swing states, and then they come out with a poll that says, well, she's doing worse in the swing states. But, not in a way that's believable given what everybody else is reporting. So for all of those reasons, I just think it's a really interesting polling universe this year. And you go, okay, but then you look at the other things that polls pick up, like Harris's favorability, as I told you, which is skyrocketing, like Harris closing the gap on who can handle the economy, which the Morning Consult poll is picking up, like the favorability of Tim Walz, the failure of the Trump campaign to tar and feather and swift boat Harrison Walz the way they wanted to. The fact that Melania and Trump are now online trying to hawk products.
Yes.
You know, people like Mark Robinson imploding, people like Carrie Lake imploding. It just, you know, you look at this and say, okay, you know, when you put the whole picture together and you look at everything, you know, Trump, it's not Trump's campaign to lose.
Okay, good. I mean, if it was, he would lose it. But
yeah, well, you know, he'd be working on it. This is from a countdown to what are called poll tracker. It says national polling schedule for this coming week. Monday is Morning Consult. That's today, not out yet. Wednesday is YouGov. Thursday is a firm called Outward Intelligence. Friday is RMG Research. That's the new Scott Rasmussen. He's the R in RMG. And then someday unspecified Big Village, which has been a Harris favorable poll. So those are the ones that are going to come out this week, plus whatever state polls come out that we don't know about yet.
Nude Africa.
Yeah, well, we don't know when they're going to poll Wisconsin.
Wait, you never know when. All right. Yes, that's true. Okay, so waiting on some new round of polling. I like the regularity of the schedule. You wait and wait for these stories to break and tamp down on any depression caused by New York Times CNN on a Monday.
Right. Now, there was a really, I found interesting article, not related to politics, except related to politics.
I see what you mean.
And it said
I will see
that scientists studying this sort of thing, not I do the research at home on Google, but like real scientists doing real research.
Lab coats.
Has said that being rewarded with things or anticipating being rewarded with things.
Food pellets, like?
Releases serotonin in your brain.
Right.
Which makes you feel better.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I looked at that and said, that's why I get so mad at people that say, fight like you're 10 points down. No. Fight like you're 1 point up, because there's your reward and there's your serotonin release. And that's why you feel better about it. And it's a much better way to go into a campaign. Because when you're 10 points down, you're depressed because you're going to lose. It doesn't make you fight harder. It makes you give up.
I know what people are saying. Well, you know, you can't give 110% either. And yet people continue to say that they will do this. Yeah, I know.
People say all sorts of stuff, but it's not right.
Right. Okay.
I'm just pointing out this actual
like
scientific
enjoying serotonin.
Value in thinking you're ever so slightly ahead, not to the point where you can coast, not to the point where you don't do the work, but to the point where I'm putting the work in, but I can see the reward. Yes. I can see light at the end of the tunnel. That is really important. And that's where we are in the campaign now. It's already fall. Fall started.
Right. It's dark-ish.
Yeah, but it's September 23rd, so it's officially fall.
Okay.
And you can see light at the end of the tunnel. People are already starting to vote.
Yeah, that's true. Early voting started here in Virginia on Friday, I think, which is weird.
Pretty big turnout, actually.
Yeah.
For everybody.
I did see some results at the first day of voting in Fairfax County, neighboring county and very populous Northern Virginia county, running about 3 times what the first day of early voting netted last time around. And remember that last time around, early voting was COVID mail voting, you know, so I think they actually got a pretty big spike in early voting there, too. But
right, but it's absolutely impossible to know what it means. Some of the rural counties in southwest Virginia are also up. But what does it mean? And besides, none of these tell you who they actually voted for. What if they're Republicans who are just sick and tired of Trump? You just don't know.
Well, the paper inside tells you who they voted for. That's the important part.
So it's nice. That's interesting. It doesn't tell me that it's going to be a low turnout election, but it doesn't really tell me much of anything at this point. It's way too early.
It told me that early voting started, and I should go and do that.
So you could vote if you want to.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
Starts us
I don't know why they did it on a Friday. Yeah, they should have waited.
The first year is going to have early voting, but October 17th is the very first day.
All right. I'm not certain what sets are. It might be, you know, X number of days prior to Election Day, because it was weird. They said Friday was it, and then the office was closed Saturday and Sunday. So if you got the idea Friday afternoon, oh, yeah, right, I should do early voting. No, you have to wait until the weekend is over. You should have just started it on Monday then.
Yeah.
But, all right, well, lots of people did. They cast their ballots. That's good. Go ahead and do it. Vote early, by all means. You know, nothing's going to change dramatically that's going to make you change the way you're voting if you're listening to this show. So you might as well get it in. You never know what's going to happen in the world. If we're hit by a comet, you'll want your ballot in. I mean, we might not count the votes if we're hit by a comet, but you'll feel better. Oh no, this comet is killing the world. At least I voted against Trump.
Right.
It's serotonin. Please. Get out there and work and vote as if the reward lever works and the hopper is full. There you go. Okay.
So, other things that are worth talking about today,
Nothing.
and it's always so interesting to me. Like, there's always more between Thursday, I have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to gather the news. So I always have a ton of stuff, and then for some reason I go through it and finish early on Mondays. I don't know why.
I don't know. Everything loses its potency over the weekend sometimes. I can't believe this story. And then it's either surpassed or, I don't know, something else develops that's more distracting.
Right.
It happens.
This is always interesting. This is New York City.
All right.
Okay. And New York City had the New York Police Department commissioner raided by the feds.
Yes, that was interesting.
But as Taniel puts it, it took me a moment to realize that the New York PD commissioner who was just raided by the feds is the New York PD commissioner who succeeded the New York PD commissioner who was raided by the feds.
Well, yeah, it's a tradition.
So, yeah, it's like a 2-month tradition. So everybody Eric Adams puts in there gets raided because Eric Adams basically is crook and a gonif.
Yes. Well, yeah, he's not. He is certainly a no good Nick himself. But it is a tradition
Yiddish,
around town.
New York City Yiddish for like he's a crook.
Yeah. It used to be a thing they do across the river. Jersey City, every mayor would get raided.
Yeah, it's nothing like that.
It happens. Okay. I mean, it's unusual sounding. And
right. So I don't know what's going to happen in Congress. I don't know if Democrats are going to take the House. I can tell you we're going to miss opportunities in New York State because the New York Democrats are just awful.
They are.
From Kathy Hochul, the governor, down to Eric Adams in New York City.
Not really sure why.
Sometimes we win anyway, but I don't understand why they're so bad. But probably because there's so much money, they're all corrupt.
Yeah, there's a lot of money in New York, and a lot of weird people who have very weird personal interests and can use their money to leverage it. And I don't know what to tell you. I mean, the Trump Tower is full of disgusting weirdos with too much money. And back in the days before he was a politician, it was. It's a good episode. It was the Mos Eisley of Earth. Everyone in it was weird, and they used their money to buy Fantasyland for themselves in New York City and state.
Right.
It was weird. Still the case.
It's the nude Africa of cities.
The whole city? I thought it's a nude Africa of condominiums.
During the break,
anyway.
David told me all I have to do is mention nude Africa and it's going to make him laugh. So I'm like, this is going to come out of... Did you hear about the Rules Committee?
Name.
They passed a rule that said nude Africa. It made you laugh.
And it will. I think it'll work for a little while, too. It's so... What a dumb name. I can't even believe it. And I do wonder whether... I asked you during the break. I mean, I don't know if anyone knows definitively if it's like Russian in origin. To think that this, it's the idea of them thinking that this is what Americans are going to be interested in. Nude, sure.
My nude Africa story for today is from the Washington Post. It's by Aaron Blake, and says, could Mark Robinson actually damage Trump? It's more common for flawed presidential candidates to hurt others than vice versa, but every little bit matters, and North Carolina is that important. So apparently the Republican Party's stuck with Mark Robinson. Just to remind you of the rules, the deadline for him removing himself from the ticket has passed.
Right.
So he's there. I think that if he himself decides to step down, he can, but his name stays on the ballot. The party could appoint somebody to replace him with his name on the ballot. Their name won't
if
be on
he
the
steps
ballot,
down.
But votes for Mark Robinson would go to that person. However, one of those odd rules that is strictly North Carolina and not necessarily the rest of the country is that he cannot be replaced by somebody who lost in the primary. I think it's part of the sore loser rules.
Okay. Yeah.
So, who would run?
I don't know how you would determine
Jacob
that.
Wohl.
He's maybe that's why Burkman stepped in.
I
to
mean,
manage
one
the campaign.
doesn't know. So it just apparently the Republican Party is stuck with Mark Robinson. He writes for now.
Yeah.
With Robinson's decision to press on, the question is less what it means for the governor's race and what it means elsewhere. Most notably, could this damage a Trump campaign that might have preferred to rid itself of this nuisance? Well, it's complicated. Robinson's decision to stick it out gives the Trump campaign and Republicans reason to fret.
Yeah.
Fretting is always good. North Carolina is crucial to Trump's readily apparent path to victory. The dynamic at play here is called a reverse coattail, which basically means a candidate running below the presidential race on the ballot could damage the top of the ticket. The term traces back to Adlai Stevenson in 1956. The conventional wisdom is things mostly happen in the opposite direction, a bad candidate at the top of the ticket harming candidates further down the ballot. But these two effects aren't mutually exclusive, and just because one's more prominent doesn't mean the other doesn't exist. The first thing to note is we're in largely uncharted territory, which is one of the reasons why I look at the polls and say, okay, I get what they're doing. They're really trying to give us an idea of what's going on. But this year, everything is just so uncharted, I don't know if they're really capturing exactly what's happening. They are with the vibes. They are with the sentiment. I'm not sure they are with the exact numbers. You know, somebody tells me that Harris is ahead of Trump by 50.73248%. You know, fine, whatever. While we've seen flawed candidates before, we've seen a growing number of Trump-backed ones fail.
Yes.
Okay.
A lot.
But then again, sometimes the lower, passes. So how GOP candidates fared compared to other statewide Republicans? Don Bolduc had a minus 9.2. Other statewide Republicans had a plus 15, so he was a big failure. J.D. Vance didn't do well in his Senate race. He was 6.6 win, but other Republicans won by 18. So Vance was a drag on the ticket. Herschel Walker finished below the average Republican in that state in the Georgia Senate race. Doug Mastriano, Blake Masters, Tim Michaels,
Roy Moore,
Adam Laxalt, Tudor Dixon, Mehmet Oz. They all, did poorly. Oz is the only one that, although he lost, did better than the rest of the Republicans. Everybody else did a lot worse than them. Oz failed, but he failed less badly than a lot of the other. But that's because Mastriano was at the top of the ticket.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really hard to make anything out of that. But Robinson is that unpopular. A recent YouGov poll, writes Blake, showed just 3 in voters had a favorable opinion of him versus about half who disliked him. Women were twice as likely to dislike him. And these awful numbers are terrible. I mean, they're worse even than many of the 2022 GOP candidates described above who did badly relative to your, generic Republican. And all of that was before the most recent allegations. And the other question is how easy it is to attach Trump to him. Well, the Harris campaign's already out with a bunch of ads having Trump, put his arm around Robinson, saying, "You're Martin Luther King times 2. You're Martin Luther King on steroids."
Yes, he actually turned out to
those
be
ads
Martin
are
Luther
already
King
out
on Viagra. But yes,
so we'll see.
Let's we'll wait and see. They are trying to distance themselves. It's hilarious. There are a few candidates he's endorsed as enthusiastically as Mark Robinson, which is amazing because they really didn't. It's nothing, I don't think, in it for Trump. It was standard fare. He was in North Carolina for a campaign event. Which Republicans have you got? Okay, I'm for them.
Right.
Although, also big endorsement and big work on Mark Robinson's behalf from super moderate, wonderful suburban dad vest guy Glenn Youngkin here in Virginia. But he can't run again, so I guess nobody's talking about it, but I don't know. He backed the guy 100%, even when he was a known Holocaust denier. So much for the moderate thing, I guess. Right? Don't buy a vest.
So I'm going to show you a picture.
All right.
And perhaps
from nude Africa?
This is like a memory game.
All right.
Do you remember where this is from?
Nude Australia. All right, I gotta go look at this thing. All right. Vote for the crook. It's important. No.
That was Edwin Edwards running against David Duke in Louisiana.
Okay.
Right, and Edwin Edwards
like
was the crook.
91.
And he won.
Yeah. He was well,
but it was a great bumper sticker. It summed up everything.
Yeah.
Look, you may think I'm a crook. You may think I'm a rogue. You may think but I'm running against David Duke, the Nazi. So vote for the crook. True. Vote for me. It's important. Anyone. Well,
that explains the T-shirts, the Trump T-shirts and bumper stickers, right? I'm voting for the convict, the convicted felon. I think they went with convicted felon rather than the shorter convict.
So, in that spirit, I entitled the Pundit Roundup this morning, vote for the Veep, not the creep.
All right. Yes.
And I think that, there's a lot going on here, and that's basically why Aaron Blake wrote that. Now, one of the things, and this is a theme that I've seen over the past few days, there's a whole bunch of people writing about, I talked to this focus group. I looked at how close the polls are. Harris hasn't made the sale. Here's why. Flurry of those. They're all about the economy.
They haven't voted yet.
Yes. And if you drill down and say, well, I know Trump's a crook. I know everything about him. I really have trouble voting for him. But then again, the economy and what's best for me. And so, I know I'm supposed to vote against Trump because of the abortion. I know about Project 2025. I don't know. I still can't make up my mind. So fine. I mean, I accept that maybe there's 3 people in the country who feel that way. Everybody else is lying. They already have made up their mind. And they're just trying to search for a rationale behind why I can do what I was going to do anyway. But that's okay. Just what strikes me is that people say that, and so reporters write this stuff up.
Yeah.
And then you look at that Morning Consult poll and say, well, actually, Harris has closed the gap. So there is no gap between Trump and Harris on the economy. So what are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, it should be expected.
And you scratch your head and you say, well, that,
news.
Trying to put those stories together with what I'm seeing in the polls is that I guess there's a bunch of people that decided, okay, she is all right on the economy. So if it just takes some people longer to get there in their heads, and, you still have another month before the election, that's okay, as long as you get there.
Yeah, and as long as you're presenting people with the opportunity to cast their ballot right away when they have decided, just capitalize on that. I think I've made up my mind. Excellent, fill this out. If the election were held today, what would you do? I would vote for Harris. Good, do it. It's being held today. Be my guest. Now you can do that. Okay.
So, Harris has offered another debate. Trump's already said it's too late, which is nonsense. He's afraid and he doesn't want to do it.
Well, that was a debate between the two of them right there.
So you have that. What else is there to talk about? I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about Olivia Nuzzi.
I don't have anything to say.
In case your listeners don't know, she was the star political reporter for New York Magazine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why, but that's what they say.
Right, and she was the one that wrote the original, people in the Biden campaign won't tell you, but he's losing it article that sparked all of the concern, and then came the debate and say, oh, well, she must be really insightful because she knows everything. It turns out she was having an affair with RFK Jr., so she's been suspended.
Yes, from the affair. He said no more.
And
suspended from New York Magazine.
It says a lot of bad things about RFK. And what was interesting, and many people are saying, many people have observed that the men reporters have sort of said, well, as long as her reporting is accurate, who cares? And the women reporters all said they all think we sleep with our sources and or use that to get to the top. So this is awful. Get her out of here.
Yes, I see what you mean.
Ruining it for everybody.
And what are the men doing? Who hasn't slept with RFK Jr.?
Well, who hasn't made a mistake in their life? This won't be the end of her. She's very, that sort of thing.
Okay. I also understand that, I guess when people with more patience.
Chris Cillizza was the first one to jump to her defense.
Well, that's just the double Z faction. Everybody with 2 Z's in their name is on her side.
Yeah. And as soon as he did that, everybody started tweeting the tweets where he was absolutely enamored of Ivanka Trump.
Oh yeah. Well, he may be, guided by principles other than political expediency all the time. I understand from people who have had more patience with the story that there's still this claim that it was something other than an actual in-person physical relationship between them. Is that holding up, or is that just garbage?
What's that?
The idea that it was something other than an in-person physical intimate affair, and it was limited in some way to like sexting one another, which is really not great. But
well, you know,
is that still holding up, or did that fall apart?
But you know, there's stuff about who sent who to what and who did or didn't block what, and the original thing was some demure pictures were sent by Nasi to RFK Jr. and RFK Jr. started showing it and boasting about it to his friends, and then they became less and less demure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, so who knows?
So very traditional in that sense. Here's some demure news. I'm showing everybody. All right, well, that's what guys do when they get nude pictures. Don't send them if you don't want that to happen. I know you trust him, etc. Well, I mean, maybe that's the reason you should be suspended. You trusted RFK Jr. with nudes of you. You don't have any sense at all. How can you possibly write for us?
Right. It just, you know, the reason I'm bringing all this up, I don't really care about Olivia Nosy one way or the other. It's more along the lines of reporters will, beat into the ground. Biden is old. We have to follow this up. They don't do it for Trump. They don't do it for themselves and each other. It just, you know, when you look at media bias in terms of how stuff is Hillary's emails, that's 80 months worth of generating discussion about that.
Right.
Well, what about the fact that there's some unethical behavior on the part of reporters? Well, you know, people make mistakes. Let's move on.
Time for a blogger
ethics conference. That's what I wrote this morning.
Yeah. Okay. Well, everyone knows that's the standby line. Circling wagons, I guess. That's one of the things. I guess if you have wagons.
Instead of circling the wagons, why don't you take the criticism to heart and tell us why you're doing what you're doing? Why is Trump being sane-washed?
That is a good question.
Right, and it isn't just because you're sleeping with RFK.
That can't be it. Right. Well, RFK is a Kennedy. They get around. So, I don't know. Okay. Well, that was weird. What a weird way to end. Well, let's come back and do it something better on Wednesday. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It was only a 1 minute break. Needed to wrap up a little bit with Greg, so I still haven't been able to cross the room and get my fabulous array of Michigan products, aside from the Faygo sodas, which I am looking forward to. I got to get those on ice so we can accompany the chips with them there. I'll get to that. Maybe we can do that during the 2 minute break. That should give me plenty of time to cross the room here. And Greg won't be here to distract me any further. So I mentioned to you that there was, I think, one additional late-breaking sex scandal, Republican sex scandal story that I didn't get on the air with on Friday. Maybe it didn't break until afterwards. The Daily Beast has got it. And I have to go through Apple News to get it. So there's going to be it's going to be a long URL here. All right, here we go. MAGA rep's daughter blasts his alleged affair with woman 27 years his junior. It's a long headline, but a descriptive one. Sean Craig reports for the Daily Beast on Catherine Green, who said that her father, Mark Green from Tennessee, I believe, her father's actions, you'll never believe this, contradict his personal branding as a Christian conservative family man. I know, right? It's very sad. In a sense, I mean, they do contradict the personal branding as a Christian conservative family man, but I guess it's kind of getting to the point where if somebody tells you that they're a Christian conservative family man, you might think, that guy's hiding an affair with a woman 27 years his junior, and we'll find out eventually. And you're right, you do, and you might say, well, see, it's what I meant. It doesn't really contradict his personal branding as a Christian conservative family man, but we take your point. Tennessee MAGA Representative Mark Green's daughter, and he is the chairman of something, because I see a picture of him here with a sign on his desk, head in hand. He's forehead palming in this. Mr. Green chairman. I forget what he's the chairman of, but when they come around and say it, I'll say, oh, yeah, that. Tennessee MAGA Representative Mark Green's daughter says her family is suffering through, quote, the loss of the person that we thought what was our father, unquote. It's an awkward way of saying it, but after he was accused of having an affair with a mistress 27 years his junior. My dad sells himself in politics as being a Christian conservative family man, Catherine Green told the Nashville Banner. His actions in the last, year have not been that. Earlier this week, it was revealed that Green's wife of 30 years, Camilla Green, accused the 57-year-old, that's Mark, of carrying out an affair with a 32-year-old woman in a text message and email to his GOP colleagues. The affair was carried out in I don't know, hotel rooms and beds and on the message boards of New Africa, I guess. It is through text messages that his wife informed his GOP colleagues of the affair. I think so. I think that's the case, given that we were just saying, everyone's saying Olivia Nuzzi had an affair with RFK Jr., but it was through email and text messages. The affair itself, apparently. I don't know. We'll see whether that changes. Anyway, the point is that that is Mark Green, filed for divorce last month. Not she filing, but he filed. That's interesting. As this is a deeply private matter, I ask for privacy, he said in a statement after the affair allegations became public. Not that he ever gave anybody else their privacy when he was running against them or opposed them politically. I will continue to serve this district with all I've got. Well, that may be nothing. As I have the last 5.5 years. Which is something he probably said to his wife about their marriage. So if you want to believe him, it's up to you. Whether you believe that he'll serve the public with all he's got. In her text, Green's wife warned of, quote, readily available predators. That's also in quotes, but this whole thing is, quote, readily available, quote, predators that would tempt men like her husband, and accused D.C. politicians who espouse family values as having affairs and getting divorces, drinking, parties. It's not the clearest statement of things, but I think we know where she's going with all of this. Green's daughter told the Banner she also believes toxic D.C. culture led to her dad's affair, divorce, and a change in his behavior. Over the last 1.5 to 2 years, we've noticed a real difference in him, she said. So who knows if that's just the toxic environment that is D.C., but something has changed. We've all had to basically grieve the loss of the person that we thought was our father. All right, it's not that they had different parentage. It's that he wasn't the man they thought he was, or that he was telling them he was. And it's an interesting shift of the blame there, too. We know, maybe it was D.C., maybe it's a toxic D.C. culture. As long as you're open to the possibility of your dad being the weak link here, maybe it's just your dad. I mean, it happens to a lot of people in D.C., that is true. That's probably more just distance from your family, plus, throwing in a little bit of power brokering in there, too. What the disgusting, shambling mound Henry Kissinger, before he croaked, said about power being the ultimate aphrodisiac. And I know no one wants to think about Henry Kissinger and aphrodisiacs, but that's what he said, and I guess that's largely true for a lot of these guys. And so when they are away from home and dealing, as they are, with what they no doubt think is the ultimate aphrodisiac. And, I mean, I guess power is the ultimate aphrodisiac for people who get turned on by power. And, not everybody thinks that that's all that awesome an aphrodisiac. But if you're self-selecting for the kind of people who come to Washington, D.C. to exercise power, some certain number of them are probably going to think of it as an aphrodisiac. And I guess Mark Green is among them. And so I do think it's a bit of blame shifting, though. And nobody wants to blame themselves. I didn't see that my father, husband, whatever, was this kind of person. And it's painful to realize that was the case all along. And I didn't know it. So I'll blame D.C. But It's also possibly a way of saying, well, so all the people that are in D.C., it's terrible. It's a swamp. And Donald Trump is going to clean it up. He's only left 2 wives for younger women. Like he was going to clean up this swamp? I don't think so. Anyway, where were we here? Catherine said that the family became aware of Green's affair, which began in the fall of 2023, in January, I guess, of 2024, after her brother found a letter from his alleged mistress. He denied the affair, but the family later found additional evidence, she told the Banner. Okay. When the news site asked Catherine if she thought former President Donald Trump, who is alleged to have had several extramarital affairs and has been accused of sexual assault or harassment by over a dozen women, was part of the negative influence on her MAGA father, she said yes and no. And really the answer is yes and more yes. But why no? Let's see. Trump doesn't lie about who he is. You know, he's up front with you. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I don't know if this family's learned anything. Or maybe the leopards are just not done eating their faces. But, all right. Trump doesn't lie to you about who he is. You know, he's up front with you. Of course he doesn't lie to you about who he is. Let's see. She contrasted the former president's style with her father's family values-based public profile. You know, Trump's an ass, but he's just good at what he does. I don't know. I think there's more lessons maybe out there for you, Catherine. You're going to be shocked. But I know this was difficult for you to accept, but your father is, as it turns out, a hypocrite, and he's not who he says he was. I want to prepare you for the possibility that another man that you trust also is a liar and a hypocrite and isn't who he says he is. But you're halfway there. You've learned that this is the case and that people can disappoint you. And another one is about to disappoint you. I mean, but you might... I wouldn't spend a great deal of your energy trying to convince yourself that that's not the case, because most of the world has figured out that that is the case with Donald Trump. But I don't know if she's listening to the program. Okay. Green announced he would not seek re-election in February before changing his mind a month later. I didn't realize that. His daughter said his reservation was related to the family's financially struggling equestrian farm. He is nevertheless likely to win in his heavily Republican district because, well, they don't care about such things. It's okay if you're a Republican. Go ahead, be a Christian family values guy having an affair with a woman 27 years younger than you. And yes and no, it's Donald Trump's fault, but also not his fault, and something. But we'll clean up this swamp. No problem. All right. Well, these people have a lot of conflicts to resolve for themselves. And, you know, sometimes we want to help with these things, or we feel like there's a way for us to intervene. And there is a way for us to intervene. Intervene with your votes and kick these people out of office and do what you can to give them the time that they need to deal with their issues and recover. I don't think that's happening in Tennessee, apparently, but I don't know. I would imagine it's going to dampen enthusiasm a little bit there in Tennessee. That at the top of the ticket is this horrific loser, and down ballot elsewhere, also in some parts of Tennessee, there's going to be this other guy who has the same problem. But on the other hand, they're all running around worshiping this guy who is leaving all his wives. So, I don't know. What can I tell you? People give Donald Trump a pass on a lot of things. I was just thinking about that this morning. As there are politics knowers who actually are, kind of out there saying, well, all these threats of Trump pulling a second coup to take power if he were to lose this election, even in convincing fashion. That won't happen. There's no way he would do that twice, which is an interesting thing to say, and maybe just not a thing that you should be saying about somebody who has been impeached twice, because I'm sure there were lots of people who said, well, surely he won't be impeached twice, even when that was being threatened. Although under those circumstances, I don't see how you could believe he wouldn't have been impeached. But no one would have bet on it ahead of time, say in between the first impeachment and the second, that there would be a second impeachment. But, he won't have a second coup. Well, he's been impeached twice. Why not? He's left 2 wives for younger women. There's at least that. And I mean, it wouldn't be a carrying on with the 2 theme, but he's bankrupted, 6 businesses. He lost 2 casinos. He has been convicted of crimes in New York 34 times. So there's that. Sued for fraud and found liable for it at least at least a couple of times. At least 2 if you want to continue with the 2 theme. Trump University, his tax cases. So I don't know. Not certain why people hang on or cling to these, these hopes that somehow they'll be different. All right, let's see. Other things I wanted to share with you, there are a number, and let's see, which one? Oh, right, here's the Jack Burkman news, with him tweeting that he's taking over as acting, where's my acting sound effect? There we are, acting campaign manager for Mark Robinson. I didn't realize he had to have an acting one. But okay, let's see, so many things also happening here that I should bring you up to speed on. Wow. Where to start? I don't know. Oh, why don't we try with this one? Here's something from Josh Marshall, which is important, and that we should get to. And I think I had to email myself the text. But something, I should have brought this up with Greg. Dang. All right, well, Greg, we'll talk about it maybe again when we see you again on Wednesday. I know this was an issue of interest for you. When we talked a while ago about the possibility of Nebraska, which I know you keep reminding us, has the weird split in their electoral votes, such that the second district of Nebraska has, the state, in addition to having a unicameral legislature, which is unusual to begin with, allows its congressional districts to cast their electoral ballots individually, rather than it's one of the 2 states in the country that are not winner takes all in the electoral college votes. And really, I don't know, maybe they ought to all be thinking about this. At any rate, the Nebraska and Maine are the two that split their votes. And there was a movement on among Republicans to snatch up that last vote and change the rules to favor Donald Trump and all Republicans in the future, I'm sure. Nebraska, as a state, pretty overwhelmingly Republican, but apparently the Omaha area votes rather more democratically than the rest of the state, and occasionally will therefore split off its one electoral vote and go the opposite direction from the rest of Nebraska. And in a close race, if that's what this is, every vote would count, or at least every electoral vote would count, even if you're forging them. Apparently, Trump still thinks they'll count. And they thought, well, maybe we can snatch back that one electoral vote, and maybe that'll make a difference, either in tying the vote or in even putting Trump over the top with a 271st electoral vote, something like that. And so they threatened, the overwhelmingly Republican legislature threatened to do that, to change the law such that Nebraska would be a winner-take-all state. The other non-winner-take-all state, being Maine, said, well, if you do that, then we will do the same, and we will snatch back the one vote that sometimes goes to the Republican candidate and put it in the column with the rest of the Democratic votes instead, and we'll nullify it. So it's not worth doing. Don't do it. And apparently, by the way, internally in Nebraska, the people in the Omaha area are, happy with the arrangement. They get to have their voices heard. They have an outsized influence in the Electoral College compared to, I guess, others in Nebraska or others elsewhere. They kind of like the situation. this unusual event of watching Nebraska's 2nd District and how it breaks. And so even though they're not listened to necessarily in Republican circles in the state legislature, the representatives of the area are attuned to this, attachment to this independence. And so they do bring it up from time to time in these debates. Well, anyway, so Maine said that they would nullify this whole thing and make it not worth the candle, as it were. The game not worth the candle. We're going to nullify the vote, and you'll just anger the Omaha constituency by taking away their influence, and for nothing. Well, get this story. I'll read you the Josh Marshall write-up here that he puts under the title of Nebraska, Maine, and New Annals of WT Actual F. What the actual F here? What's going on? This is something we wouldn't have guessed at. I suspect this won't matter, he says. A lot of facts aren't known, and I'm not sure all the players have yet put their cards on the table, but I wanted to address the topic Nicole put on your radar yesterday. So this was something that I think he wrote up on Friday. He's speaking of Nicole LaFond, who had written for TPM an article on Lindsey Graham helps Nebraska GOP resurrect effort to screw Dems out of an electoral college vote. Lindsey Graham really all too willingly puts himself in the middle of attempts to steal away electoral college votes or forge new ones. He was injecting himself into the Georgia Brad Raffensperger just find us some votes situation. Again, he's from South Carolina. At least Georgia was a neighbor. Nebraska is just not a neighbor. But Lindsey Graham is meddlesome in all of this. Let me read you the Josh Marshall piece, though. Maybe we'll go read as much of the other pieces we're able to. Anyway, Republicans, he goes on to say, are making another push to change the electoral law in Nebraska and thus take away a single electoral vote, which Kamala Harris is likely, but by no means guaranteed, to win. We start by making clear that Nebraska has every right to do this. All but 2 states allocated their electoral college votes in a winner-take-all basis. It's shifty and inappropriate to do it so late in the cycle for a clearly partisan purpose. But there's no issue here of voting rights or election rigging. Maybe. They can do this. I should note here that I don't think it will end up making a difference, but yeah, it could. It's certainly possible that Donald Trump could become president again because of this, and that would be terrible. But we don't know whether Nebraska Republicans will be able to come up with the votes. We'll come back to that. But if you remember when this came up earlier in the year, Maine, the other state with this system, they said they would also make this change if Nebraska did. In other words, if Nebraska made the change, then Maine would counter and cancel it out. Nebraska Republicans were struggling to come up with the votes anyway, so that seemed to be the end of it. That there wasn't any point. Then, a few days ago, Republicans started making another push. When I first saw this, I thought, well, what's the point? Maine is locked and loaded to counter and neutralize it. Well, about that. At the time, Democratic leaders in Maine made very clear that they were ready to do this. The Democratic House Majority Leader put out a statement. It is my strong recollection that they also said that if Nebraska came back and tried to do it later, they'd counter it then. So basically, don't try, Nebraska Republicans. There's no point. But then I noticed earlier last week, a reporter at, I think, Politico saying that a new law takes 90 days to go into effect in Maine. So Maine has run out of time. Certainly this reporter had her facts wrong, but then I noticed that the reporter had previously, I don't know whether he was certain, but maybe he felt that. Certainly this reporter, maybe this reporter had the facts wrong. It should be a maybe. But then I noticed that reporter had previously worked at one of the papers in Maine, which kind of shook my confidence a bit. You see where I'm going here? This seems to be true. In Maine, a law takes 90 days to go into effect. I don't know, Mainers, can you tell us about that? Nebraska has no such restriction. You can overrule that with a supermajority. Oh, I see. But Maine Democrats don't have legislative supermajorities. We're way under 90 days before the election. But critically, we're now under 90 before electoral votes are cast on December 16th. When I first saw all this, I thought I must be missing something. Certainly, it was reasonable to figure that the leaders of the state legislature in Maine had a handle on the rules for passing laws in Maine, but it seems like maybe they didn't. And I mean, I've discovered a number of times that like senators voting on something, oh, surely they understand it better than we do, even though it looks like the rules are this. They say the rules are that, and they must know better than we do, and then it turns out they don't know. Or members of the House. These certain actions or remedies or procedures are available to you. They haven't been used in 80 years, but they are available to you. You know that, right? Chairman of the House Oversight Committee? What? Never heard of such a thing. Really? Sometimes it happens. So, at first I thought I was missing something. Certainly they would know, right? But it seems like maybe they didn't. And since the new Republican effort seemed to start up almost the day after the 90-day limit passed, it really seems like they were waiting for it to pass to make another effort. I mean, seriously, WTF? So far, I haven't seen anyone in a position of actual authority, the Democratic state legislative leaders, the Democratic governor, address the calendar issue. Maybe they know they've got it covered. Maybe they knew they goofed and were trying to come up with a workaround. The reporting on this so far has been very limited. So it's not clear to me whether this is something in Maine's constitution or whether it's a legislative rule, in which case legislatures can often meet as committees of the whole and rewrite their legislative rules. In other words, I think we still need to know a bit more about what the nitty-gritty details are in Maine. We also don't know whether they really have the votes in Nebraska to do this. There seemed to be significant Republican resistance to doing this at the time. Some of that is just generalized resistance at electoral game playing. Some of it's more focused on the fact that it requires people from the district, which gets to choose its own elector, to give that up. What all this adds up to is that it's not clear they can get the votes to do this in Nebraska, but truly having the presidency on the line has a way of concentrating people's attention. So I would not put a lot of money on them not being able to do so. That's another factual question we need to see more reporting on. In any case, this is where this stands. I think it's pretty unlikely this will matter. It's not too hard to imagine a situation in which it does. Have Harris say win 3 blue wall states but lose Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina, and she only becomes president with that single Nebraska electoral vote. That's not a crazy scenario. But elections tend to fall more clearly in one direction or another. And beyond the consequences of this imbalanced switch, if it happens, it remains stunning to me if we're here because the top political officials in Maine either hadn't figured on this rule or hadn't thought out its potential impact in this scenario. I'll keep you posted as I find out more details on this. And we'll have to wait and see and watch. I don't watch Josh Marshall closely enough to know whether he's posted more on this today, but I guess we could go and take a look. Any of the things that I have a link to only to TPM in general. Yeah, and the editor's blog, that's still the last entry on the front page. So I guess he hasn't written up anything more on it anyway. Let's see. What about that Lindsey Graham article? I think, are we going to be able to read that? Let's take a look at that one. Lindsey Graham helps Nebraska GOP resurrect effort to screw Dems out of an electoral college vote. Hey, any bad news about Lindsey Graham, I'm happy to share with you. Except, of course, that we've got a break coming up. So again, Nicole LaFond wrote this up. This was back in, not that long ago. Okay, so the end of last week, September 19th or so. All right. Well, maybe we'll set the tone, play the music. I'll go get the potato chips, and I'll read the brand names for you and plug all the appropriate Michigan brands. Let's see. Almost music time here, and then we'll read the first paragraph. Senator Lindsey Graham is leading a delegation for Donald Trump to Nebraska, where the senator is making a last-ditch effort to convince a critical mass of the state's Republican lawmakers to change how Nebraska awards electoral college votes, a shift that could turn the state into a winner-take-all situation. Unlike most states, blah, 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 you know all about it. Maine is the only other similar state. The revived push by Trump allies to convince Nebraska to change its system. Oh, my goodness. Well, I'll be right back after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's run through the Lindsey Graham article here. We were just, I was running out of time before the break cut us off, and just dropped out in the middle of the sentence there as I saw what was coming up here. By the way, let's see, there was an SAT word included in the paragraph we were in the middle of. Where did we leave off? There was the explanation of how they split up their electoral college votes, and we kind of skipped over most of that. All right, the revived push by Trump allies, here we are, to convince Nebraska to change its system, which, again, I'm just baffled by Lindsey Graham injecting himself into all of this stuff. But let's see, the effort to revive or the push to convince Nebraska to change its system is a pellucid attempt. How do you like that? Pellucid attempt to prevent Vice President Kamala Harris from winning the Electoral College vote from the state's 2nd congressional district, which includes the city of Omaha. Democrats were awarded a vote in 2008 and 2020 for winning the popular vote in that district. And I think I have tape somewhere of the Mannings discussing where the vote is centralized in the 2nd district in Nebraska, Omaha, over and over again. Anyway, Trump allies led by far-right online provocateur Charlie Kirk. So there you have it. Charlie Kirk and Lindsey Graham teaming up on this one. Already attempted to change the way Nebraska divvies up votes earlier this year when President Biden was running for re-election, but Republicans in the state legislature failed to pass that bill that would have made the switch. Republicans are clearly nervous about Harris carrying the Omaha, but also Obama-based district in November. There's a capital O in here and ends in an A, so there you go. Her running mate, Tim Walz, who was born near Omaha, did you know that? I don't think I had heard that yet, held a jam-packed rally there last month, which could help her secure the presidency. The stakes are high, per the Hill. I agree that the stakes are high, but should that really have anything to do with it? The Hill had written up, if Harris loses Arizona, we heard this from Josh's write-up. If Harris loses Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, and Nevada, which we sincerely hope she does not, and there's some chance that she may win every single one of them, or at least some of them. She could still win the presidency by winning the other states won by President Biden in 2020, as long as she also wins that single electoral vote from Nebraska's 2nd District. That would give her exactly 270 electoral votes. Graham, I think I incorrectly said at some point the 271st. All you need is a 270. Graham reportedly made a trip to Nebraska this week at the request of Nebraska GOP Senator Pete Ricketts and Governor Jim Pillen. I know that they may have made this request, but that's thin cover. Don't do it. You don't belong there. Anyway, the two of them are both supportive of the change. Similarly, Republican members of Congress from Nebraska put out a letter on Wednesday calling on lawmakers back home to bring the bill back up for consideration before the election. As members of Nebraska's federal delegation in Congress, we are united in our support for apportioning all 5 of the Nebraskas, that's what it says, the Nebraska's electoral votes. It's like the Ukraine. Electoral votes in presidential elections according to the winner of the whole state. The letter, addressed to Pillen and Nebraska Speaker of the Legislature John Arch, said, "It is past time," like they've been trying this forever, "it's past time that Nebraska join 48 other states in embracing winner-take-all in presidential elections." Why? Because they think they can take them all. That's all. That's all there is to it. Okay. The Nebraska is going to have this problem, along with the Ukraine, the Sudan, I think they used to call that as well. All right. Speaking to reporters on Thursday after his meeting with Pillen and Ricketts, Graham said that he was hopeful his efforts to resuscitate the previously failed effort would be fruitful. The whole fate of the country and the world could hinge on one electoral vote. That's right. That's why you shouldn't do it. He told reporters, according to CBS News, "I hope the people in Nebraska will understand this may come down to a single electoral vote, and I just don't believe a Harris presidency is good for Nebraska." Well, the rest of the country disagrees. Pillen is reportedly willing to bring lawmakers back for a special session to try to pass the bill again before Election Day, per CBS, who has this quote from him: "As I have also made clear, I am willing to convene the legislature for a special session to fix this 30-year-old problem before the 2024 election," the governor said, though he noted that he must first receive indication that there's enough support among state senators. Early voting in Nebraska begins this October 1st, but the Secretary of State said a switch to winner-take-all system could be implemented anytime before Election Day on November 5th, according to a report from KOLN. So, there you have it. That's of some interest. The Republicans being sneaky and underhanded, and what can I tell you? I guess this brings to mind for me something that did I say it over the weekend, or was it from earlier? I don't know. I got to open up Pocket to make sure I still have everything handy. But something I said, I don't know, maybe last week, end of last week, that got a lot of attention on Blue Sky, which was, I think I have to scroll back to get my my phrasing exactly right. Yes. And this was in response to the story that I crammed in on Friday, in the last minutes of the show, about the Georgia State Election Board approving a new rule requiring counties as the Washington Post puts it, counties in the critical presidential battleground to hand count all ballots this year. I don't know if I actually did make that one on the air, because I think it was, we read the story about their passing the new rule that would allow elections board members in the counties to refuse to certify based on pretty much nothing. I have a feeling there's something wrong with this vote count, and so therefore I refuse to certify, right? But they also passed at the same time a new rule that would require a hand count of all ballots this year, as they say in the Washington Post write-up of it, potentially upending the election by delaying reporting of results by weeks, if not months. And that got me thinking, and we should probably read that story, and then we can talk about the thinking that followed it. Before I do it, though, I did want to come back to the Michigan products that Rosalind McGregor brought along with her for for our, review, our enjoyment. I don't know that we're going to review the products necessarily, but I'm sure I'll review them right now. How can you go wrong? First, there was the Faygo sodas, which I think I've got a cream soda, a vanilla cream soda out of it, and a strawberry soda. The potato chips, which you can hear sound effects right here. That's the bag rustling. A family-sized bag of Better Made Special potato chips, the original potato chips. These, although, well, it says original, but these are the 50% less sodium version. So good for your health as well. But Detroit made, Better Made potato chips by Better Made Snack Foods Incorporated of Detroit, Michigan. And by all reports, the aroma of these delicious potato chips fills the air for blocks in every direction around the factory. So these look cool. I love the regional stuff. Since 1930. This package has not been here since 1930. I would not eat them. But they've been making these delicious chips since then. And the box of Gilbert chocolates from Jackson, Michigan. And a delicious assortment. It is alleged on the golden box here. Trump would love this box. But I am betting that everything is going to be fantastic. I haven't gotten into the chocolates yet because, it was late by the time I got home. So I'm looking forward to it, but thank you very much. I'm thinking of the collection of stuff. I collect a lot of food, apparently, on this show, but between that and the fantastic coffees, teas, and cookies that Judy Vincent sent from Hawaii, and the various other local delicacies that have just shown up, or things that have been procured from across the world, fancy teas, and all kinds of things that Scott has sent, including at one point the world's largest collection of blue Jordan almonds. But I love the local delicacies. And not even so delicate delicacies. Potato chips, I don't know. I just love those local brands of everything. Always a hit with me. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much to Rosalind McGregor. And I won't eat them on the air, but I'll tell you all about them at some point. Although it's good sound effects. You could eat potato chips on the air to great effect. I don't know if you would like to hear that, but at any rate, I wanted to then turn my attention back to what I had just promised you from the Washington Post, the report from, I think, Friday. But I guess, the 20th, right? That was Friday. Pro-Trump Georgia Election Board votes to require hand count of ballots. Now, I got to parse down into this and see exactly what they're asking for, because if it's like, well, we're going to hand count every ballot in Georgia, that will take 1,000,000 years. And that, of course, would probably play right into their hands as well. Remember that the coup ploy from January 6th was, if we can just delay things, like they had some very weird idea in their head that because there was the requirement from the Electoral Count Act that the votes be counted on January 6th, that if they delayed it until 12:01 a.m. and it became January 7th, that therefore, in their view of the whole thing is off. If the electoral votes were not counted on January 6th, then I don't know what happens. There's no such thing as electoral votes, or I don't know. It triggers the backup mechanism whereby they wanted to get to this eventually. The backup mechanism whereby the House of Representatives, constitutionally, if no electoral college winner becomes clear. That it was meant to be that if no one got a majority of electoral college votes, nobody made it to 270, then the House would vote to elect a new president, and that they would vote by that weird mechanism whereby each state delegation has a vote. And the issue was that there were a majority of states, 26 at least, had their delegations controlled by a majority of Republicans. And if they all cast their votes inside of their conference, caucus, what have you, from the state, the delegation vote, it would come out with 26 votes controlled by Republicans, who would presumably vote for Donald Trump, And it wouldn't matter that he lost the election by millions of votes and really had lost the Electoral College vote as well. They were going to do whatever they could to produce a situation whereby they could pretend at least that there was confusion and that nobody had gotten the 270 Electoral College votes, whether they in fact had gotten them but delayed things until January 7th such that it was no longer January 6th, so therefore none of it counts, or whether it was something more manipulative, like convincing Mike Pence that the forged Electoral College certificates from the various states that sent them were the real ones and Donald Trump should be the winner. But even if you didn't agree with that, then at the very least there was enough confusion that the House should select the president. They would like to get back around to this again because I guess they anticipate losing the popular vote overwhelmingly, possibly losing the Electoral College vote as well. But if they can delay things such that Georgia never ends up reporting its Electoral College votes, then that too might produce either no one with a majority or enough confusion that they could say, we don't know what to do, but we should throw it to the House of Representatives and let them vote. So this is one method of getting to that. But whether or not that works, once you get to it, is another question we'll address later on. Critics, it says in the subheader of this story, plan to sue, saying the new requirement would almost certainly lead to errors and could disrupt the process of certifying the vote in a crucial battleground state. I don't know who's thinking of suing, but I know that in the recent past, when these election boards have voted to consider these new rules, Brad Raffensperger has stepped up and said, we're going to sue as Secretary of State to stop this, which is something, frankly, I didn't necessarily expect him to do. I have kind of always hedged my bets on Brad Raffensperger because he seemed to be saying last time around that the reason that he not only that he did say he wouldn't help Donald Trump in his scheme, but it sounded like he was saying, I won't help you because I don't think the law permits me to. But if you change the law such that I'm permitted to, then I might be willing to help. But then he sort of reinforced his position by saying, well, if you try to change the law to do this, I will sue you. So that was something. Amy Gardner is the author of this piece for the Washington Post. The Georgia State Election Board approved a rule Friday requiring counties in the critical presidential battleground to hand count the total number of ballots this year. Okay, that's different. Potentially upending the November election by delaying the reporting of results. That doesn't necessarily mean do a hand count of the vote tally, but hand count the total number of ballots this year to match it against the number that the machines say were cast to see if there's any discrepancy. But it does open the door for delaying results for a long time. One, because hand counts are notoriously inaccurate. And two, because even if it's super accurate, if all you're proving is that there's a discrepancy between two counts in terms of the number of ballots cast, what does that even prove? But it doesn't matter. They'll be able to say there's a discrepancy. And so therefore, the move was spearheaded by a pro-Trump majority in the legislature that has, or rather the electoral board, that has enacted a series of changes to the state's election rules in recent weeks, which I thought was fraud per se in Republican views, according to the last election anyway, and approved the hand count requirement despite a string of public commenters who begged board members not to. Again, remember that there were lawsuits after lawsuits after lawsuits. Now they lost, but there were lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit from the Republicans and the Trump camp that said that that changes in election rules not made directly by the legislature of that state were invalid on their face because of a faulty and stupid and upside-down reading of the Constitution and the delegation of the authority to the states to determine how their elections will be held. Anyway, critics included democracy advocates who accused the board of intentionally injecting chaos and uncertainty into the presidential contest, as well as election supervisors and poll workers who said hand counts would take too long, cost money, and almost certainly produce counting errors. The Office of the Republican State Attorney General, which is responsible for advising the board, wrote in an opinion that the change was unlawful, so maybe they'll sue too. The board voted 3-2 to approve the measure, which would require the hand count in addition to the customary machine count in each precinct. The rule requires the hand count to take place the night of the November election or the next day, which I think is by design wrong, because dozens of election officials said that would be, A, physically impossible in all but the smallest counties, and many also said in public comments on Friday that it is far too late in the year to adopt new procedures for which their staffs have not been trained and for which they have no money. I was going to add, well, the reason that they want it to take place the night of the November election or the next day is that very frequently absentee ballots, overseas ballots, military ballots were still arriving, and they'll be excluded from the count this way. Military ballots have already been issued, said Ethan Compton, election supervisor in southern Georgia's Irwin County. The election has begun. This is not the time to change the rules. That will only lower the integrity of our elections. That's a point that they would make if the shoe was on the other foot, for sure. The hand count requirement was one of 11 rules expected to be up for a vote on Friday. The latest batch of the state election board has considered in recent weeks in an effort, proponents say, to make state elections more secure and transparent. And sure, why not pass them now that the election is already underway? That's so transparent. Well, in a way, I guess it is. The flurry is the work of a new right-wing majority that took control of the board in May with an avowed mission of preventing fraud and other irregularities from tainting the presidential result this year. And they're going to avoid fraud and irregularities from tainting the election by changing the rules once it's already begun. That's a fantastic way of doing it. All three of the new members are supporters of former President Donald Trump, and the rules they're pushing have been promoted by the state's leading proponents of the false claim that Joe Biden stole the Georgia election in 2020. Board member Janice Johnston, who was among the three voting in favor, said making sure the number of ballots cast is equal to the number of votes logged by the machines is essential to establish as early as possible so that any discrepancies can be investigated. It's better to do it at the beginning than to try to do it at the end when you don't have a remedy if there's a miscount, she said. A handful of speakers defended the new rules, citing irregularities in the 2020 election and claiming that hand counting would bring needed transparency at a time when trust in the system is low. Why aren't public servants allowing us to see the accountability? Asked Mary Bell Hodges, a resident of Gwinnett County in suburban Atlanta. The person who proposed the hand count, Fayette County Board of Elections member Charlene Alexander, told the state board that much of the criticism is based on misinformation because the rule requires the counting of the number of ballots to make sure the count matches the machine totals, but it doesn't require hand tabulation of how people voted. Okay, and that is a difference. Critics said that's still an unnecessary burden on election offices, and most speakers warned of the myriad ways that they believe a hand count would upend the presidential contest in Georgia, an electoral battleground that Biden won by fewer than 12,000 votes 4 years ago out of some 5 million cast. Several pointed to federal court precedent recommending a 90-day quiet period ahead of elections, during which it is widely considered imprudent to change the rules because of the risk of confusion, error, and insufficient training. And remember also that the guy who's running for president from the Republican ticket this time around was convicted on 34 criminal counts back in, May? And we've delayed his sentencing 3 times until finally delaying its sentencing until after the election because, as you know, inside of 90 days or so, there's a quiet period ahead of elections during which it's widely considered imprudent to do things like that because of the risk of confusion, error, etc., influencing the outcome of the election. That stuff has to stop. But changing the actual rules that the election, which has already begun, is going to be conducted under, what are you going to do? Others said hand counting would cost millions across the state, with the need to hire and train additional workers to conduct the counting, which the rule specifies must be done by 3 individuals per precinct. Another concern, requiring poll workers to handle ballots, in some cases multiple times, if the hand counts don't match the machines and must be started over. That injects a security risk into the otherwise strict chain of custody rules surrounding ballot handling. In other words, you're going to have situations in which pro-Trump people are appointed by the Trump campaign to represent them on these 3-person panels, and they're going to be handed all the ballots, and they're going to count, and they're going to begin to see, oh my gosh, we actually lost this county, and I counted 25 ballots, but if I say 26 instead, then they're going to say, damn, we screwed up. Let's count them again, and I'm going to get another chance to go through these ballots. And when I see the ones that are marked for Kamala Harris, I'm going to stuff them in a trash can. I'm back to 25 now. Even though now I'm handing over 22 ballots, but I threw out a couple of Kamala Harris ballots that I found. But I know the number I need to get to is 25, so I'm just going to say 25 at the end, even though I just stuffed a couple of these in my pants. That's a problem, right? Sarah Draper, a Democratic member of the state legislature and an election lawyer from DeKalb County, was pointed in her comments at the meeting. It makes me question whether members of the board are operating in good faith, Draper said. Putting 11, maybe 12 new rules into play days before Election Day is a grift. It's not what I think of as the word grift, but okay. We are setting up our counties to fail. Why do we know they're going to fail? Because they are telling you that. Democrats have already sued over a rule passed earlier this year that could allow counties to delay certification, with a hearing scheduled on October 1st. More litigation is expected. Research and practice have shown again and again that hand counting of ballots is less accurate than machine tallies, and that it can take days, weeks, or months, depending on the size of the jurisdiction. Most jurisdictions in the United States already audit election results by hand counting a sample of ballots and comparing the results with machine tallies. They do so after unofficial results have been reported, encouraging confidence in the result without gumming up counting on election night. An early version of the hand counting plan, which was proposed by one of the majority board members, Janelle King, would have required the count to take place on election night in each precinct. The board agreed to alter the proposal. The version taken up Friday allows counties to begin hand counting in their central offices as late as the next day. The rule requires 3 poll workers to count each precinct's tallies independently. If their totals don't match, they must report the discrepancy to the county election board. The hand count would be required to be completed within the week, which experts say is not possible. And again, by the way, when they say the 3 poll workers have to count, and if their totals don't match, they got to report the discrepancy. If you're looking for there to be a discrepancy so that you can just point and scream discrepancy and therefore fraud, what motivation do you have to count accurately? Just if 2 people count accurately, I count 100, I count 100, well, I count 99. No, now we have to report a discrepancy. Did you count 99? No. But am I going to say I counted 99? Yes. I mean, why not? Right? That's all it takes. Earlier this year, the board passed a rule that critics say could empower county boards to delay certification of results. And that's all you have to do in order to do it. Now I have a doubt. I'm the one that said it was 99. Everybody else said it was 100. I even will tell you it was actually 100, but I'm going to say it's 99. I'll admit it. The point is, I'm not going to certify. Anyway, the rule allows boards to demand, quote, reasonable inquiries if they have questions about the outcome of an election. The rule does not specify what a reasonable inquiry is. Like if I just repeatedly say 99 when I know it's 100, is that reasonable? And it places no limits on the time frame of such a probe or what documents a board can demand. Georgia law requires county boards to certify the results by the Monday following an election, but critics of the new rule say it could lead boards to misinterpret their power and refuse to certify, thereby slowing the process of state-level certification. In a presidential election, the calendar for determining which presidential electors will convene and send their votes to Washington is fixed and inflexible, with disruptions having the potential to derail the process. This year, electors are due to convene in every state on December 17th, a precursor to the counting of electoral votes in Washington on January 6th. Some critics say that because the hand counting requirement would almost certainly inject error into the tabulation process, it could give county boards the evidence they need to investigate results and delay certification. Some questioned whether the two rules together amount to intentional sabotage of state elections. That is a good question. Requiring poll workers to hand count ballots after the close of the polls will do nothing more than provide exhausted patriots with an opportunity to undermine public confidence through an honest mistake. That's an interesting way of putting it. It said Joseph Kirk, elections chief of Bartow County, northwest of Atlanta. The Office of State Attorney General Chris Carr also weighed in with a formal analysis of the proposal on Thursday, stating that state law does not permit hand counting of ballots at the precinct level. Board Chairman John Fervier, who was appointed by Governor Brian Kemp, voted against the proposal and said he thinks that the rule puts the board in legal jeopardy. If the legislature had wanted this, they would have put it in a statute. That used to be the Republican position in 2020. This board is not here to make law. We're here to interpret law, and I don't see anywhere in statute where we're interpreting the hand counting of ballots after they come out of the machine. Well, there's a bit more to it. But yes, the whole point of this was that it is time, as I had said on Blue Sky before the weekend, Democrats need to think hard, but not long and hard, about what hardball tactics they will and won't be willing to employ against, what does this come down to if he tries to pull this again on January 6, 2025? A twice impeached convicted felon, now set to pardon himself, by the way, if he seizes the presidency, after losing the popular vote by millions 3 times in a row, and now threatening his second coup in a row. Are you telling me that Democrats won't be willing to use hardball parliamentary tactics to prevent this from happening? Should the Democrats actually win control of the House of Representatives, but not necessarily control all of those state legislative delegations in case the House votes? You can change that. You can fix that with procedure.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
I didn't mean to sneak this in at the last second, but yes, you can refuse to seat the members-elect from states in which the outcome of the election is supposedly in question, thanks to Republicans questioning every single ballot. Don't seat them. They can't vote. This was your idea, not mine. Let's talk about that a little bit more tomorrow.